Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 21. Returning victoriously. Debauchee was walking behind Jun Xie, her eyes staring with great interest at the huge package carried by the bodyguard. Originally, she had thought that her earnings today were quite generous. But then, Jun Xie had suddenly won so many precious treasures in that last game. Many amongst these items were the type that could not be valued using money. This had caused a sense of conflict to arise in her heart, which had already been beset by an uncomfortable feeling. How was it that this useless freeloader could end up winning so many good treasures? And why was it that me who have always been so obedient end up with nothing? Debauchee's eyes moved about non-stop. Is there a kind of method that can allow me to get some items from him? But if I were to ask directly, that would be unladylike. D*MNU. Jun Moxie. Why aren't you taking the initiative to offer some of them to me? Tang Yuan's smile spread widely all the way up to his ears, looking almost like the Buddha. Maitreya. He walked up to the front energetically and vigorously, like a tiger. Third young master. Your actions today had totally won me over. Wahahaha. Seeing those B***stards losing everything, they have made me feel so happy. Brother. Isn't it time to give me the sword and accompaniment jade? Give you? Jun Xie stopped and looked at Tang Yuan with a surprised look. What are you talking about? Why should I give it to you? Why? Tang Yuan was suddenly startled. He stammered. Could it be you have no intention of giving it to me? Give it to you? Jun Xie revealed an even more surprised look on his face. Do I owe you anything? Why do I have to give it to you? What are you talking about? That. Tang Yuan's expression had become truly pitiful. He finally realized that those items were won by Jun Xie. That meant that those items now belonged to Jun Xie. How could he ask from him such a precious treasure? However, if his father were to ask about it when he returns home, then what? The money was not the problem. The problem was that the items were now in Jun Xie's possession and can no longer be retrieved. The young master Tang finally understood that even though Jun Xie had returned victorious, his problem still remained unresolved. Thinking about the fearsome face that his father will have, the fatty Tang shuddered. Giving it to you is absolutely impossible. Jun Xie shook his head fervently. I have never participated in a non-beneficial transaction. Not today. Not ever. Having said that, he looked at Tang Yuan's depressed face and added with a different tone. However, selling to you is a different story. In this regard, how about you by using the amount of benefits that you got from this matter? Jun Xie smiled mysteriously, as he held out a finger. Waha! You really are my good brother. Tang Yuan felt as though he had been reborn. He became so excited he forgot himself. Without considering what benefits he who had lost everything can gain from this matter, he jumped at Jun Xie, hugging him. He did not imagine that Jun Xie could not possibly bear the weight of his body. His act of jumping at Jun Xie caused them to fall flat together on the floor with a thud, with Jun Xie being squashed beneath him. Young Master Tang was indeed a heavyweight character. His body had squashed Jun Xie, leaving only his slabs of fat visible. As for Jun Xie, not even the corners of his clothes could be seen. Debauchee suddenly burst out laughing. These two clowns. They're simply too funny. Everyone rushed towards Tang Yuan and pulled him up. Jun Xie, who was at the bottom, looked as though he had been choked to death. Surrounded by fat to the point where not even air can flow in. Jun Xie felt incomparably dispirited. To think that a man would press down on me today. This is what you call hell. Fatty Tang. I am now very angry. The price is now increased. That sword and accompaniment jade will not be sold for less than 1 million silver liangs. The due date for this price is tomorrow. Come tomorrow. The price will be 1.5 million liangs. Jun Xie ruthlessly said as he straightened himself. His nostrils felt as though it was still filled with the smell of fat, causing him to feel nauseous. Ah! Tang Yuan screamed miserably. The group walked out of the street and stopped. To the east lies the Jun family and Tang family residences, while to the west is the Donghua family residence. Now that the time had come to separate, Donghua Xiaoyi suddenly felt an inexplicable feeling rising within her heart. Observing Jun Xie's crooked smile, she thought, this B***** Jun Moxie does not have a good reputation, and is also a downright debauchee. But, after having bantered with him for a bit, he seemed very interesting. Thinking about this, Donghua Xiaoyi shouted, Jun Moxie, will you be coming for my grandfather's birthday? Jun Xie was startled. If my family members want me to go, then I will definitely go. Then what if your family members do not want you to go? Donghua Xiaoyi bit her lips. Naturally, I will not go. Jun Xie felt baffled by her question. Since they do not want me to go, then why would I go? Go and get a flogging? B*****. After hearing Jun Xie's reply, Donghua Xiaoyi became inexplicably angry. She suddenly rushed at Jun Xie and started kicking him fiercely. If you dare be absent, I will beat you up every time I see you. Understand? Jun Xie suddenly felt as though he was thrown into a mountain of hardships. How tragic. The dignified number one assassin in the world actually had to endure being bullied by a little girl. When will this body meet up to my expectations? Trying to cover his face, he repeatedly shouted. I will go. I will definitely go. I will definitely go. That's more like it. At least you are sensible. When the time comes, you must prepare a good present. The present must not be worth less than what have you earned today. Donghua Xiaoyi stared fiercely at him. Her big eyes swiveled towards the big package for a moment before walking away. She turned away with a sweet smile as she rubbed her wrist, giving out a pampered hang. With her hands behind her back and her chin lifted up high, she hobbled down the road like a proud deer. It turned out that this girl still wanted more items from Jun Moxie's winnings. However, this attitude from her was already far different from back then. Granted, in Donghua Xiaoyi's heart, Jun Moxie remained a good-for-nothing debauchee. Watching Donghua Xiaoyi walking away, Jun Xie turned his attention back to Tang Yuan. He smiled faintly at Tang Yuan. Young Master Tang is truly masterful. Kiki. You even ended up losing your wife. I cannot help myself but admire you to the extreme. Tang Yuan suddenly became furious, his face becoming blotched red. Observing Tang Yuan's reaction, Jun Xie's eyes slowly turned ice cold. Tang Yuan, it does not matter if you want to clown about. However, this time around, you nearly got me killed. Do you know how strange today's matter was? Ah. Nearly got you killed? Tang Yuan was shocked senseless. Not even in his dreams would he imagine that these words would flow out from Jun Xie's mouth. Do you really think that your luck is so bad? Are you really that kind of idiotic fool? After losing all your money, you lost your sword. After losing your sword you lost your accompaniment jade? And after losing your accompaniment jade, you were actually idiotic enough to pawn off your own fiancé? Tang Yuan, ask yourself, are you really that kind of an idiot? Even if you were that big of an idiot, How severe would the consequences of this matter be? The reputation of two great families will be discredited. Can you afford to bear those consequences? You actually did not consider these at all. Did you not think that something was wrong here? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 22. Persuasive Temptation. Jun Xie glared relentlessly at Tang Yuan, his set of eyes transforming into a sharp knife, piercing deep into his heart. Ask yourself, do you really have the guts to do something like this? Tang Yuan's face, which had been bitterly crying, slowly became calm. He was no fool. On the contrary, he is actually a very shrewd debauchee. Listening to Jun Xie's words, he started to recall what had happened and realized that too many of the instances were very suspicious. The things that had occurred were simply not the kind of things that he would have done. Even if he were in a dream, it was not certain that he could have done it. However, he actually did such an outrageous act on his own free will. How was this possible? Am I really that much of an unbearable person? No. No way. I may not be a good person. I may be someone who always misbehaves. But I am someone who understands where the line is. The things that had happened today were obviously something that I would never do, even in the face of death. But I actually did these kind of things today. Furthermore, I continued perpetrating these actions, each more excessive than the other, each more shameful than the other. These were all actions which I would rather die than commit. These actions would cause my entire family to be disgraced. These actions would cause me to be thrown into an abyss of no return. But then, why did I do those things? All of a sudden, Tang Yuan's mind became a chaotic mess, his thoughts falling apart. When you entered earlier, was Meng Haizu also wearing that same clothes? Jun Xie's eyes were strict, but his mouth revealed a near devilish smile. Yes. But what does that have to do with it? Was there a problem there? Tang Yuan was not able to understand. Did you also smell some unique perfume from Meng Haizu? It was a very pleasant scent. Right? Jun Xie continued asking. Yes. I think there was a bit. It was indeed a very special perfume. Tang Yuan continued with uncertainty. Before you entered, did they also serve you a cup of tea like they did today? Jun Xie continued. One after the other. Yes. That's right. What about it? What about it? Jun Xie sneered twice. Well, it was nothing much. It was just the beginning of your eternal damnation. Tang Yuan was no fool. After pondering on Jun Xie's words for a moment, he suddenly jumped up. A look of shock expressed on his face. You mean, the tea? There was a problem with the tea? Just the tea? Jun Xie sneered again. Meng Haizu's clothes, that perfume he was wearing, that tea, all of them had problems. When a bunch of gamblers gets together, the first thing they did was to drink tea. What kind of norm was that? You pig head. You actually did not notice such an obvious problem? But didn't you also drank the tea? How come you are still all right? Tang Yuan felt confused. Do you remember that after I drank the tea, I sneezed while going in? Jun Xie's face was filled with an indescribable expression. Faintly smiling, he continued. That sneeze caused your clothes to become wet, right? Correct. That did happen, Tang Yuan suddenly remembered. When most people sneeze, the most they will discharge was some sputum. Instead, I actually caused your clothes to become wet. Could it be that you did not wonder about it? Jun Xie tilted his head and looked at him. So that was what happened. Tang Yuan suddenly came to understand what happened, but was again puzzled by something. But how can you clearly know about all this? How can I clearly know? Jun Xie hesitated. This was indeed a tough question to answer. Am I supposed to say that this senior had already become so familiar with these drugs that I can recognize them without using my eyes or nose? In my past life, I can detect these things with just the reaction from my body pores. Jun Xie rubbed his nose. The only way to explain everything was to throw a pot of dirty water on himself. About that. I have also done that kind of thing before. You understand? As expected from third young Master Jun. What an undoubtedly exceptional tactic. Tang Yuan's admiration for Jun Xie rose to great heights. He replied respectfully. You are truly a great expert. Jun Xie was moved to the point of laughter and tears. He reminded, even though the promissory note is no more, I fear the fact that you lost your wife will likely be spread out by them. You should probably figure out something to do about it. That is right. What should I do? Discussing about this matter caused fear and anxiety to well up in Tang Yuan as he was lost about what to do about it. At the current, you only have one path to take. And that is to go back home immediately and tell everything that had happened to your old grandpa. You must not hide anything and you must not exaggerate anything. You must launch a preemptive strike. Let your grandfather make the decision on what to do. He will decide what kind of countermeasures to take. But if you were to wait until he hears about this from someone else and asks you about it, then you are truly finished. Jun Xie laughed sinisterly in secret. As for you, you are simply someone who was set up. I believe that your old grandpa would not put too much blame on you. Not to mention, this matter can only be resolved in this manner. Your old grandpa is far more capable in dealing with such matters compared to you. You must be feeling very furious at them right now, right? I will teach you another great trick. First, leave your sword and accompaniment jade with me for the time being. Then, take 1,000,000 silver liang bills to redeem them. And when they cannot bring them out, you understand? Jun Xie lowered his voice, almost as though he was a devil who was in the process of tempting the average layman to commit crime. Correct. Tang Yuan slapped his thigh. This is the only viable way. And also the only chance to gain the initiative. But all they need to do is redeem it from you with money. You fool. Back then, they used those things as wager against my promise. And not against a specific amount of money. There is a world of difference here. Do you think I will give it to them? Stupid. After all that, are you saying you still do not understand? What are you still waiting for? Jun Xie laughed. Oh, right. I will give you another good stuff. As though he was performing a magic trick, Jun Xie pulled out a teacup from within his bosom. What was most surprising was that there were still a few drops of water within the bottom of the cup. This was the cup that contained the drug. I took it with me earlier. Jun Xie smiled. There seemed to be a bit left inside. Ha ha ha. Pro. Truly a professional. Third young master is definitely a professional. Fatty Tang carefully took the cup. He then quickly rolled away with the sound of a horse breaking wind. Just like a wild horse that had its rear sliced open. Trying to plot against me? Then I will just plot against you first. Jun Xie observed the Fatty Tang's back as he rolled away. Jun Xie smiled proudly. Considering the background of the Fatty's family and his wife's family, the Li and Meng family will probably be in for a busy time, right? Jun Xie had already prepared a small bench, ready to watch the incoming show. This time around, The results would have been different were it not for the accidental participation of debauchee and the change that had happened to Jun Moxie. Even if he had no fear towards them, to disrupt their plans would end up exposing his real strength, causing him to become the target of countless enemies. When that happened, the losses would outweigh the gains. Even though his opponents were clearly also debauchees, these debauchees were backed by the first-rate families of the city. Without the behest of these families, would these few lumps of shoddy material actually dare to drug Tang Yuan and Jun Moxie? Would they dare to act with such arrogance, with such recklessness? Impossible. There was absolutely no such possibility of this happening. Even though Jun Moxie himself was an extremely disappointing debauchee, behind him was grandfather Jun, the Jun family. Although it was clear to all that grandfather Jun was the only one supporting the Jun family, a thin, starving camel is still bigger than the horse. Within the military, nearly 1/3 of the military generals were under the command of grandfather Jun. As long as grandfather Jun is still alive, then these men would become the debauchee, Jun Moxie's solid support. Regardless of their willingness, their body were engraved with the mark Jun. Once something happened, then the consequences would create a monstrous storm within the royal court. Once the Jun family falls, these people will not have any good days either. They would be forced to fall apart and be suppressed by the other factions to the point of not being able to fight back. But as long as the Jun family existed, these people will have a place to stand by. They would be able to come together to fight against their enemies, regardless of whether it was domestic or foreign enemies. That was why nothing must happen to the Jun family. That was why these men would not stand by should anything happen to Jun Moxie. Even though each of them looked down on this young debauchee, when the time comes to act, none of them will show any hesitation. The same can be said of the Tang family. The strength of the Tang family may not be close to the Jun family, but in the city, their strength was definitely amongst the top few. Should these two families come together, even the currently flourishing Donghua family will be forced to take a step back. Of course, this does not mean that the Jun family's strength was worse than the Donghua family's. During its most prosperous period, the Jun family had once suppressed the Donghua family to the point of them not daring to lift their heads. This situation lasted for a good 7 years. But now that the Jun family's talents have fallen, and the Donghua family's new talents keep mushrooming out, they slowly produced new talents, one after another. It was here where they have overtaken the Jun family by a great distance. That is why the Donghua family is currently the one with the most potential. At least, that is how it would appear to outsiders. However, as long as grandfather Jun remained alive, then the Jun family will never fall. Even for the imperial powers, they must carefully consider before doing anything to the Jun family. It can even be said that they do not dare. And yet, this Li and Meng families actually came together at the same time to set up Tang Yuan and Jun Xie. This was very unusual. Extremely unusual. If this had seemed ordinary, then something was wrong. Indeed, the ones who were involved this time were only debauchees, genuine debauchees. Even if this matter were to be exposed, then the general population would only think that this was only some mischief caused by some youngsters. After laughing for a little, none of them would likely take them to heart. However, what if it had succeeded? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 23. Tang family's reaction. Jun Xie deduced with clarity that should today's plans end with success, then both himself and Tang Yuan would fall into the palm of the enemy. The Tang family may not suffer that much, since they still have other successors for the family. However, The Jun family only has him as the only successor. Even though it was only a request. But who knew what kind of calamity would result in the end? Especially when this request was placed upon Jun Moxie, a debauchee who does not know how to judge the severity of the situation. Most of the time when this Jun Moxie had caused a disaster, he would not be aware of it. He would even feel elated about the incident. After all, his grandfather would help him clean up the mess. What would happen when the struggle had become apparent and Grandpa Jun's authority had fallen into the hands of others? When that happened, even if Grandpa Jun was willing to make the sacrifice of severing relations, then what? What would those generals choose? Even if only a small number hesitated, the consequences would be unimaginable. Jun Xie felt the need to increase his capabilities. Even though he had a rich reserve of experience from his past life, the events of today had left him with an understanding of his obvious inadequacy. Chief amongst them would be the so-called political awareness. This was the one thing that he from his previous life had lacked the most. If he were still a solitary assassin in this new world, then this matter would be of no importance. However, in order to create a foothold within this great family, he will need to protect those he cared for from harm. Trying to maintain the stability of this great family without a keen sense of political awareness was a nonsensical pipe dream. He needed not become an official. He also needed not participate in the struggle to rise or fall in the royal court. However, he must possess the awareness towards the power struggles that was occurring. It was midday noon when Grandpa Jun returned home. On his way back, he coincidentally bumped into Tang Yuan's grandfather, Tang Wanli. Tang Wanli led a big group of warriors on horseback, charging his way forth down the Great Street. After which, he turned north. From the way it seemed, he was on his way to find someone with bad luck. To the north was the location of the great families such as the likes of the Li and Meng families. Tang Wanli's face looked similar to a black pot, his eyebrows seemingly almost burnt away by his fury. Grandpa Jun secretly felt elated. It had been so long since I had seen this old thing become so furious. To think that the rich old Tang who was always at peace could become so riled up. It does not matter who he plans to go against. There will definitely be a good show to watch. How could he have guessed? The director of this unfolding drama was none other than his detestable grandson, Jun Moxie. Grandpa Jun was overwhelmed by curiosity and asked, "Brother Tang, where are you heading off to in such a hurry? Why do you look so serious? Could it be that someone had stolen your son-granddaughter-in-law? Just look at that frenzied expression on your face. Ha ha ha." Grandpa Jun's words were intended as a joke. But how could he have known that the reason Tang Wanli was so furious was precisely due to that? "You old geezer Jun. You cheap B*****. You are no better yourself. Just you wait till I am done with the Li and Meng family. Then I will come back and deal with you myself." Blowing his white beard straight, Tang Wanli slammed with his whip, urging his horse to pull away and move forward. He too knew what kind of person Jun Moxie was. No better than his own grandson. Now that his grandson had fallen into such an unlucky situation, Jun Moxie instead managed to clinch such a complete victory. For that Jun Moxie to emerge smelling of roses must mean that there was an expert supporting him in secret. The most probable suspect was none other than the Jun Zhantien before him. And now that Jun Zhantien actually had the gall to openly make fun of him, it was only natural that he would become angry at Jun Zhantien. He left Grandpa Jun standing alone, completely dumbfounded by what he had just said. What did this old Tang Wanli meant? With just a few words, he cursed me a good 3 or 4 times. He didn't even state things clearly. Just what is going on? After a while, he spat out a mouthful of spittle. The Li family and Meng family offended you? Then why did you suddenly drag me into your troubles? This is what you call when dogs bite one another. Their mouth becomes full of gross hair. Tang Yuan followed behind his grandfather, his head filled with despair, his face smeared red with shame. When Fatty Tang returned home, his father was coincidentally sitting at the house hall. Crying, he shouted for help from his father and mother, screaming that something bad had happened. This action of his scared his father to the point of nearly falling off his chair. When he re-examined his surroundings, he realized that his fearsome grandfather was also seated there. Under grandfather Tang's coercion, Tang Yuan did not hide anything. Forcefully pushing away his tears, Tang Yuan revealed everything that had happened. What transpired next could be imagined. Both father and son of the Tang family instantly erupted with rage. In addition, Tang Yuan produced the teacup that still had some residual drugs on it. When their family pharmacist tested it, he confirmed that Tang Yuan's story was true. These two Li and Meng families were too vicious. Their actions were obviously intended to taint their Tang family's reputation and let it be known throughout the world. Grandfather Tang, who had always attached utmost importance onto their family reputation, could not let this slide. Grandfather Tang immediately became furious. Lifting Tang Yuan's round body, he scolded him with an ear-breaking voice. After which he threw him down to the ground and told him to lead the way to the Li family and Meng family so that they can head off to seek justice. Grandfather Tang is someone whose age outstrips even Grandpa Jun, enough to be titled a minister of 3 emperors. For the past few years, he had been reclusive, not going out at all. His emergence this time actually involved a large escort of warriors, his killing intent soaring through the skies. It seemed that both the Li and Meng families were bound to face an inevitable chaotic storm. Even though Tang Wanli cursed at Grandpa Jun did not feel angry at all. Watching Tang Wanli erupting in anger to the point of actively seeking the Li family and Meng family actually made him feel somewhat comforted. There was no need to ask. That big fatty Tang Yuan must have caused this whole mess. Thankfully, my Moxie had been obedient this whole time, studying poetry and literature. A lot of my worries have been reduced thanks to that. If he is still causing problems for these old bones of mine. Kiki. That pitiful old Tang. To have to do all this for the sake of his grandson at this age. Observing the near hysterical looks on Tang Wanli's face, Grandpa Jun was tempted to provoke him further. How could he have known, when he, who had proudly returned home, would receive news that Jun Xie had brazenly taken money to go gambling? Grandpa Jun, who had returned home with such high spirits, suddenly stumbled. Losing money was a small matter, but if something else had happened, then it may devolve into a serious situation. Once he heard the news that Jun Xie had returned, Grandpa Jun furiously rushed towards his room. After barging in through the door, he was stunned. A package full of precious treasures was casually placed atop the huge bed. Not one of those treasures were ordinary. The tender little Ku was smiling to the point of squinting her eyes. She evaluated each one of the items, her fingers moving around, calculating how much those items can be sold for. Examining carefully, Grandpa Jun was shocked. All things aside, there were at least 3 accompaniment jade, its luster crystal clear as it exuded a warm radiance. One glance was enough to tell him that this was no ordinary object. But that was not the cause of Grandpa Jun's surprise. What caused it was the inscription upon the jade, Year X Month X. Congratulations on grandson Feng's birthday. Year X Month X. Congratulations on grandson Jun's birthday. Wasn't this the accompaniment jade that can only be worn by the direct descendant of the Li family? This quality jade was also a symbol of the Li family. Furthermore, Feng and Zhen were the names of the grandsons of the Grand Preceptor Li. How could these two items end up in Moxie's possession? Could it be that this little guy had actually gone out to rob others? Grandpa Jun fiddled with his beard, looking somewhat alarmed. Looking around at the others, Grandpa Jun suddenly snorted out. He had accidentally applied too much force and pulled out a strand of his beard. Those two jade rui was obviously an item from the royal family. In addition, there was also the Meng family's accompaniment jade, as well as that pearl, and that. Where did all these items come from? Grandpa Jun's face was twitching as he asked, fully prepared to help Jun Xie clean his butt. If this brat really did rob all these items back, then this was a really big problem. That was not to say that Grandpa Jun's mind was pessimistic, not believing that his grandson could end up winning all these items in a gamble. He simply knew his own grandson too well. There was no way that he could have the ability to win all these high-grade items. What a joke! He had laughed at old Tang Wanli just moments ago. It turned out that what awaited him in his own house was this kind of unreasonable trouble. Grandpa Jun became momentarily speechless. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 24. Grandpa Jun's Dilemma. It was only then did little Ku realize that the master of the house was standing at the doorway. She was momentarily shocked. Then she quickly kneeled in salute before replying. These treasures were won by the young master when he went out to gamble earlier. He won? He really won? Jun Zhantian's voice became low, his mind filled with delight and surprise. If there were no one around, he would probably have shouted out. However, above the feelings of delight and surprise, there was suspicion within Grandpa Jun's mind. When did this brat begin to learn to win money? From what I remember, he had never won anything since the day he learned how to gamble. If it was not for Grandpa Jun limiting his pocket money, by now the entire Jun residence would probably have been gambled away by Jun Moxie. But now, not only did he won, he actually won these kinds of high-grade stuff. It is true, these treasures were won by the young master. No matter how much gall this maid have, I would never dare to lie to house master. In addition, the young master also brought back 3 million liangs in silver bills. Little Ku answered without hesitation. From what I've heard, these were all won from young Master Li and young Master Meng. When the young master returned, he placed the treasure here for me to arrange before going to the library building to read books. Little Ku was filled with pride, because the young master had never won anything before. But this time, Jun Xie had actually won so much. In the little girl's heart, her young master had suddenly become more capable. Even though she still feared the young master, she felt that the young master of today was different. At the very least, he was no longer that detestable. That brat went to the library building again? At this moment, Grandpa Jun's feelings of joy exceeded that of his surprise. Not having to worry about how to clean up his grandson's mess was one thing. Hearing little Ku saying where his grandson had gone to was another. He stared ahead blankly, looking as though he was unable to handle this incoming emotion. With trembling hands, he reached up to his forehead to ensure that he was not having a fever. After that, he checked his sense of hearing to ensure that he did not hear anything wrong. It was only after that did he recover himself. Oh, when he returned later, tell him to come find me. After saying that, Grandpa Jun brought the housekeeper Pang out together, leaving the little Lolita counting over and over again, her eyes gleaming with silver. These 3 accompaniment jades can be sold for at least 100,000 liangs. That bead and gemstone can be sold for at least 150,000 liangs, and that, at least, added with these silver bills, wow! Old Pang, What do you think? Jun Xie, who was walking back, was unable to figure it out. The actions of his grandson for the past month had completely baffled him. What was he planning? What was he doing? This old servant do not know. However, the young master's current actions are definitely good. Old Pang also seemed confused. Nonetheless, not having to help clean up Jun Moxie's mess can definitely be considered a good thing. If he is really interested in reading, what do you think about me sending him to Wenqing Institute of Knowledge? Grandpa Jun asked on a whim, a fantasy-like yearning on his face. Wenqing Institute of Knowledge is Tianqiang Kingdom's leading place of learning for all scholars. Within it, the number of teachers and students combined are less than 1,000. This number is simply too small compared to the several hundred millions of Tianqiang Kingdom's population. This meant that only those who were of worth, who possessed a high level of talent, would have the possibility and qualifications to enter this place to learn. As long as these students graduate, the kingdom would often employ them. However, even those infamous geniuses would be forced to undergo a very difficult phase of learning in order to graduate from this place. It could be said that Wenqing Institute of Knowledge is the golden road for scholars. Regardless of who or what your background may be, not even a prince or princess can be allowed to enter Wenqing Institute of Knowledge if they do not possess genuine talent. For Grandpa Jun to actually consider sending Jun Xie to Wenqing Institute of Knowledge, it seemed that he had already believed that Jun Xie had turned over a new leaf. It would probably be very difficult, based on Jun Moxie's abilities. How was he someone that can enter Wenqing Institute of Knowledge? All those that have been accepted were those that had laboriously studied for tens of years. They who were qualified were the most illustrious and infamous amongst geniuses. How can that grandson of yours who had remained ignorant for 16 years and had only started reading for a month be qualified? Naturally, old Pang was unable to be straightforward regarding this matter. He subtly continued, Wenqing Institute of Knowledge is much too pedantic for this old man. But if Senior Master were to personally go and end up suffering a setback? Sigh. I humbly believe that we should take this slowly. Let's observe for a while longer. Alas! How unfortunate that this brat's level of Xian Qi cultivation is simply too mediocre. It would be for the best if he could enter the Divine Xian Institute of War. For generations, our Jun family had always become generals, fighting through the battlefield. If our family were to actually produce a pedantic man, then our family will really become unremarkable. Jun Xie himself realized that this matter was not easy to handle. Back when the second prince was entering the Wenqing Institute of Knowledge, the emperor himself had to endure Grandpa Jun's anger before sending the prince in. Grandpa Jun had always been at odds with the scholars, making this even harder. Not to mention Moxie's personality. Old Pang, what do you think? What kind of arrangement should I make for Moxie? Grandpa Jun sighed continuously. Sending him to study? This brat is certainly not made of that material. Sending him into the military? This B** star does not have even the slightest talent. He cannot endure pain, and cannot endure training. Send him to do business? I fear that he would lose money to the point where he cannot even pay for my coffin. Do I really have to just leave him as a useless freeloader waiting for death's call? Speaking of this subject, old Pang became frustrated and tried to comfort Grandpa Jun. The young master has started maturing lately. He may very well be trying hard to reach the top himself, turning over a new leaf. Ah, the young master is still very young. I believe that it is still not too late. This type of hypocritical comfort is what I hate the most. You actually learned to do this as well. Jun Xie frowned and rebuked in a vexed manner. Old Pang, this is not like you at all. Look at you. Where is the Pang Lai who had fought single-handedly against tens of thousands of enemies on the battlefield back then? Old Pang smiled bitterly. It is not as if I wanted to say that. But what else can I say other than that? Am I supposed to say, each grandson brings with them a blessing? But you can forget about your grandson. Everyone knows that your grandson is a smear on the wall that cannot be developed in any way at all. No matter how much you worry, no matter how much you prepare a path for him, would he not end up ruining everything by himself? Was I really supposed to say that? I might as well tell you to decapitate me. There is one method that can protect the young master. That way, senior master will not need to worry about the young master, Old Pang said as he suddenly recalled something. What method? Quick, tell me. Jun Xie was surprised. He had only thought of blowing off some steam today. He did not expect Old Pang to actually have a way. This method is actually somewhat difficult to implement. Old Pang was about to say it, but then began to hesitate. The method is for us to buy a young Xian beast that is at least of the 8th level or above. After that, we can train it at all cost. Stop. 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 Jun Xie forcefully interrupted Old Pang's words. Old Pang, are you sleep-talking now? Do you actually think this kind of method is possible? Old Pang thought about it with his eyes staring forward, then sadly replied, impossible. Since you know it is impossible, then why are you talking about it? Jun Xie gave out a muffled sigh. Xian beasts. They are a special life form in the Xian continent. Any one of the high-leveled Xian beast will possess extremely powerful strength. It is said that any 8th-level Xian beast could fight evenly with a Sky Xian expert. As for the 9th-level Xian beast, they are no less powerful compared to the Supreme God Xian expert. However, even the Xian beasts have their own form of hierarchy, much like the humans. Their ranks are even more stringent in comparison to humans. For human experts who grasped certain special skills, it was possible for them to challenge and defeat opponents whose Xian Qi cultivation was higher than them. But this was not possible when fighting against Xian beasts. Xian beasts of the 4th level and below can only be considered the same as wild animals. At best, they may perhaps have slightly more destructive power when compared to normal animals. Only from the 5th level onwards will the Xian beasts possess some special ability. However, the Xian beasts of the 6th and 7th level are of not much use, even more so when they are young. Additionally, once the Xian beast reaches adulthood, it can no longer be tamed. Some Xian beasts require several decades to reach adulthood, others up to 100 years. Waiting so long for a cub to mature, what was the point? Not to mention, the strength of the 6th level Xian beast can at best only be on par with the silver level Xian Qi expert. Therefore, the price for this level of Xian beast is not high, and is relatively easy to find. However, from the 7th level onwards, the situation becomes different. Xian beasts of the 7th level onwards possesses the intrinsic ability to break through. These Xian beasts could be said to rival humans in terms of wisdom. Besides having innate skills, they also have a special ability. It is also due to this ability that the development process of these cubs becomes exceptionally difficult. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 25. Operation. The Xian beast's body of the 3rd level and above will automatically form a special crystal. This crystal is known as Xian Core. The 7th level Xian beast's special ability involves the ability to absorb the condensed Xian energies from other life forms. This ability would increase their rate of growth. It was also due to this that the cubs of the 7th level Xian beasts were so rare. Even if one were to become available, the price on it would be astronomical. As for the 8th level Xian beast's cub, those would be priceless. They were simply the stuff of legends. In the recent decades, there have been no news of anyone possessing an 8th level Xian beast cub. High-leveled Xian beast's main area of occupation is deep within the cursed forest, a dangerous place where not even supreme divine experts dared to enter. The surface area of the cursed forest was vast, a boundless realm. It practically accounted for a quarter of the continent's land area. The ones found at the peripheral area were mostly low-leveled Xian beasts and some normal animals. As one enters deeper into the forest, the risk soared to new heights. In addition, should a high-leveled Xian beast find itself outmatched, it would simply shake its ass and run away. The cursed forest was the paradise of high-leveled Xian beasts, making it impossible for anyone to chase after them. If one's strength was insufficient, they may not even have any hope of coming out of the forest alive. In order to obtain the cub of an 8th level Xian beast, a minimum of 3 Sky Xian experts or above were needed. This number was the absolute minimum in order to defeat at least 2 adult Xian beasts of the 8th level, but this was easier said than done. Moreover, the defensive capabilities of Xian beasts were more powerful in comparison to the average Sky Xian expert. Also, if they were to bump into a group of 8th-leveled Xian beasts instead of 2, should that happen, then even a supreme divine expert will end up being buried there and then. For an expert to attain the Sky Xian rank, which one of them were not powerful heroes or characters with precious identities? Things like great wealth was assured for them. So, why would they participate in this highly absurd deal? That was also why Grandpa Jun could only bitterly smile at this proposal. Let's head to the library building and watch what this brat is doing there. Grandpa Jun felt as though something strange was going on with his grandson for the past few days. The both of them then headed onwards towards the library building. After arriving at the library building, however, they found it to be empty. The young master left the library building 2 hours ago. I do not know where he went to, the bodyguard assigned to watch over the library building reported. Both of them looked at one another. Let's just go back to my study room. Grandpa Jun felt tired. Having walked so far, his heart was feeling melancholic. While walking back, he said, "Bring over all the books that he had read to my place." While Grandpa Jun had been worried about his dear grandson, Tang Yuan's grandfather, Tang Wanli was leading his group of men towards the Li and Meng families to seek justice. Within the courtyard of the Li family residence, Li Yuran, who was dressed in spotless white robes, stood elegantly under a peony tree. Etched on his near-perfect, handsome face was the hint of a shallow smile. His eyes gazed passionately at the distant dark skies for a long time without issuing a word. A warm and harmonious breeze blew, lifting Li Yuran's robes, causing them to flutter in the air and his entire being becoming similar to a precious jade tree. This sight would cause others to feel admiration welling up in their hearts. This manner of bearing was truly rare. A rare sight to behold. Li Feng and his 2 brothers stood before Li Yuran, their faces full of sweat even though it was the most pleasant period of the autumn season. However, they did not dare wipe off the sweat, allowing it to fall down, drop after drop. It dropped down their nose, down onto their eyebrows, into their eyes, causing them terrible discomfort, and yet none of them dared to blink it off. Whatever you say now would contribute towards nothing at all towards this matter, so we shall put an end to it. Let us just consider it as Jun Moxie's lucky day. But as for you..." Hearing Li Yuran saying this, the 3 of them trembled. Although they were of the same generation, The fear they have towards this gentle-looking youngster had permeated deep into their bones. No one had ever seen this youngster lose his temper. But every time the three brothers saw him, they would feel an atmosphere of danger resounding from the very depths of their bones. Each of you will go receive 40 disciplinary beatings, and also have your total expense deducted by half a year's worth. Li Yuran smiled gently. His demeanor remained elegant as he gazed into the distance. He continued in a soft voice, much like the waves of spring water. Tomorrow, you must still do the things that you were supposed to do. Do you understand? Under 40 disciplinary beatings, even if their ribs were not broken and their muscles not snapped, they would at the very least end up with a layer of skin torn off, revealing their red flesh. In addition, them having to continue doing what they were supposed to do tomorrow, this punishment was extremely harsh, absolutely devoid of consideration. Especially since these three were Li Yuran's close cousins. However, Li Yuran calmly stated their punishment with an indifferent tone of voice. His eyes also exuding a calm aura. It seemed as though he was not dealing with his close cousins, or humans in general. His actions resembled the way people deal against 3 disposable dogs. However, Li Feng and his brothers reacted as though they had been granted amnesty, uttering their thanks again and again. From their actions, it seemed as though the punishment was one filled with kindness, a light punishment. Jun Moxie, he. Li Yuran smiled gently and said in a light tone, "You can leave." It was only after hearing these words did the 3 brothers dared to move. They were unusually well behaved as they meekly walked away, an expression of having found great fortune etched on their faces. "Come." Li Yuran lightly clapped his hands. In an instant, 2 black-clothed figures quietly appeared by his side. They bowed down, awaiting orders. "Well, go investigate in detail why Jun Moxie was able to win this time. Also, investigate why the psychedelic drugs did not work. In addition, confirm whether the appearance of debauchee was truly a coincidence. Even if debauchee had appeared, Jun Moxie should not have had any chances of winning. Once you have clearly investigated those matters, report the results to me immediately." He spoke with the same indifferent voice, as though he did not want to spend too much energy even when talking. "Affirmative." The 2 black-clothed figures saluted respectfully. Before they could turn around, they saw a green-clothed person who was out of breath ran in. As this person entered within 10 paces before Li Yuran, he slowed down and controlled his breath, but his face remained red. Only after having controlled his breaths did he went before Li Yuran. Reporting to young master, the Tang family duke. Tang Wanli is bringing the young master Tang and hundreds worth of troops towards our Li family. Their manner of movements looks threatening. Oh. They want to give us troubles. Li Yuran's eyebrows gently moved upwards. Softly, he continued. How unexpected. Even Tang Yuan would have this level of craftiness. It seems some adjustments are needed for our plans, he. Very well. Go inform Li Zhen and his brothers. When Grandfather Tang asks them about it, they should, answer. Also, execute the disciplinary punishment immediately. Only after the punishment is halfway done should you bring Grandfather Tang to go question them. One of the black-clothed figures nodded and rushed off. Li Yuran's mouth curled into a smile as he suddenly turned around and asked. Among those that Grandfather Tang had brought with him this time, are there any that we had been keeping an eye on? Yes. The green-clothed man replied without the slightest hesitation. There were 3 of them. 3, that is enough. A mysterious smile flitted upon Li Yuran's face. He raised his head to gaze upon the billowing clouds upon the sky. The originally warm autumn wind was now mixed with a slight cool air. Li Yuran whispered in an inaudible tone. It is about to rain. Now that the Tang family's elites have moved out, this is probably a good opportunity. In his eyes, a trace of cautiousness and hurry appeared as he spoke. Immediately notify Qin Hu to take this opportunity. Now that the Tang family forces have been emptied, he must obtain the item that I had mentioned before from the Tang residence. He can only succeed. Failure is not allowed. This is the only opportunity. Raising his head upwards again, he continued. Tell him that he has the whole afternoon for this operation. Also inform him to use those that have never appeared before. Regardless of success or failure, they must not leave the slightest trace. Affirmative. The other black-clothed figure flew off. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 26. 5 Type of Herbs. You can go ahead. I have it under control. This time, you've done well, Li Yuran said calmly as he looked at the green-clothed man. The green-clothed man suddenly became excited. He clenched his fists and replied. This subordinate will return. His actions were as though the words, done well, were a high level of praise. Li Yuran nodded lightly, his face still as calm as water. The green-clothed man backtracked with his head down for 10 paces before turning around. After turning around, he walked away with large strides. It was only then did he release a long sigh of relief. He dared not even let out a gasp while he was before the young master. Listen. Immediately go inform my grandfather who is currently in the palace with his majesty. Inform him that Tang Wanli brought a group of experts to our Li residence. But do not worry. Even though his coming will not be a good thing, it also represents a good opportunity. There are pros and cons to every situation. It all depends on whether we can grasp the benefits. Li Yuran faintly smiled. His dark hair billowed amongst the gentle winds. In the darkness, an affirmative sound rang out. After a short while, that person left with a quick level of speed. Jun Moxie managed to escape this time, allowing the Jun family the fortune of staying out of it. However, if the old Duke Tang causes enough trouble for the Meng family, then the Meng family will be forced into a very difficult spot. When that happens, all grandfather needs to do is to act, causing the Meng and Tang family to become enemies. We can bring the Meng family to our side. We might even be able to make them submit. The Jun family only have Jun Moxie as its successor. Making plans to deal with them will not be difficult. As for the Donghua family, we still cannot move against them. Or rather we are unable to. Li Yuran lightly sighed. He held out his clean hands. His hands white and delicate. Looking as though he was fearful of disturbing the tranquil environment of the tree peony, he plucked out a piece of leaf. Lowering his head, he gazed placidly at the green leaf and said, but even so, it is not so bad. At least, it is interesting. From afar, the sound of thundering hooves can be heard. Soon, the sound came before the doors of the residence. Li Yuran smiled gently. Raising his eyebrows, he ordered, open the gates and greet the senior Duke Tang with utmost courtesy. Finishing the sentence, his slender fingers suddenly flicked outwards. His body gave out a flash of yellow and the leaf in his grasp flew out with a golden glow. It silently embedded itself onto the tree peony's tree trunk. At the same time that the green leaf shot outwards, a bolt of lightning suddenly flashed. The clouds billowed, reaching the skies above. The fearsome wind had begun blowing. At the moment when the lightning flashed, Li Yuran's white robes was swept upwards by the violent wind. With a flash, His upright body disappeared from the courtyard. Where did Jun Xie go? The place Jun Xie went to was one that Grandpa Jun could not have guessed of even in his wildest dreams. This place was one which Grandpa Jun had absolutely believed that Jun Xie would never step into forever. This was the place where Jun Moxie had suffered a severe beating twice. Each of these beatings left him unable to crawl out of bed for half a month. Furthermore, these 2 beatings were the only 2 times since birth that he had to suffer from domestic violence. And that location was Jun Moxie's third uncle, Jun Wui's courtyard. Jun Wui devoted his entire life to the military. Even his living quarters was located as close as possible to the Jun family's military training grounds. Jun Wui was abnormally quiet as he sat on his wheelchair. He swept his gaze across the flower garden and stared at the Jun family bodyguards exercising within the training grounds. His expression changed. The long-absent heart of a warrior seemed to have been rekindled. Jun Xie was squatted before him, his hands utilizing the mysterious fortune art as he inspected Jun Wui's legs. He checked from top to bottom and from bottom to top. He checked very carefully, from every inch of tendons to every fiber of muscles. A month ago, Jun Xie's body did not contain even a trace of internal energy, making it impossible for him to check. Now though, not only did he possess internal energy, it was one titled as the first eternal art, the art of unlocking heaven's fortune. As such, Jun Xie wanted to carefully check again to ensure that nothing was amiss before deciding the method of treatment. After a long time, Jun Xie, who was drenched in sweat, stopped checking. He stood up with lit-up eyes. How is it? Jun Wui's chiseled face seemed as though he was indifferent towards the result as he asked with a light tone. However, his pair of fists was tightly clenched. The veins on the back of his hands throbbed explosively. It was obvious that his heart was unable to remain calm. Although he did take note of Jun Xie's lit-up eyes, he was unable to bring himself to believe that his legs that had been paralyzed for so long could have any hope of being restored. Jun Xie was his final and only hope. He dared not even ask Jun Xie if he could be cured and only asked, "How is it?" His desire for an affirmative answer was simply that high. Your condition cannot be considered optimistic, but there is no need to be pessimistic. Jun Xie smiled. There is a need to exert some efforts, but I am confident that I can allow you to stand up again. Excellent. Jun Wui was no longer able to refrain himself from expressing happiness on his face. Despite the excitement, there was some skepticism. After all, countless world-renowned doctors had assessed his legs before and concluded that it was hopeless. Even if he had been acting strange lately, how could the debauchee nephew of his come up with the ability to cure him? However, Jun Wui, who was like a drowning man, had no intention of waiting for death. He would try to grasp even a straw in order to survive. Even if this nephew of his was only bragging, he would only end up being disappointed one more time. How could outsiders understand the third Master Jun's state of mind? I will list down the necessary herbs. Third uncle will need to make arrangements for people to buy it up. As long as these few herbs can be obtained, I believe that the day third uncle stand up again will not be too far off. Jun Xie said. Very well. Which herbs are they? Are any of them especially rare and expensive? I will immediately arrange our men out to search for it. Jun Wui became very anxious. Intestinal cracker flower, common heart grass, 9-leaf grass, persistent severing root and blazing meridian lotus. Jun Xie listed out 5 types of herbs in one breath. Naturally, he had stated the names given to these herbs in this world. For the past few days, he had been searching through all the medical books in the library building since the names of these herbs that he knew of is different from that of his past life. Thankfully, the library building does possess a significant number of medical books. Jun Xie was able to find what he needed by following the medical information of the herbs. Using that method, he found the name of the herbs in this world. I have heard of the common heart grass, intestinal cracker flower, and the persistent severing root. But what kind of herb is the 9-leaf grass and blazing meridian lotus? Jun Wui frowned. He was someone who had been seeking a cure for his condition for a long time. His experience with the knowledge of medicine can be said to be quite extraordinary. However, he did not know of those two herbs. What was even more surprising was that these names actually came out of Jun Xie's mouth. Jun Xie smiled as he took out a book from his bosom. He showed Jun Wui a picture of a plant from the Book of Plants. This is the 9-leaf grass. And this is the blazing meridian lotus. Among the herbs I listed, the blazing meridian lotus is quite hard to find as it is rarely seen. The rest of the herbs are quite commonly seen and should be available in our residence's medical warehouse. If it is not, then it should be available in the city's medical shops. Great! Jun Wui's eyes stared fervently at the few herbs on the book, as though it was a priceless treasure, his voice trembling. It has been a whole decade. He can finally feel a strand of hope before him. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 27. Show me your true abilities. Third uncle. If our medical warehouse does not have the herbs we need, then you will need to pay extra care to detail. We cannot only send one person to go buy the necessary herbs. If possible, send a few of them, each charged with buying one of the herbs. Most importantly, no one must know the reason for buying these herbs. Even if others may not know of what these combined herbs can do, we must still act to prevent any what-ifs. In fact, I must carefully check all the herbs even after we have finished gathering them before processing it. Jun Xie continued. As of now, our Jun family is in the decline, withering day by day. But once third uncle's body is restored, the situation will become totally different. I believe that there are many who wish that third uncle would stay paralyzed forever. And that is why this matter requires utmost discretion. Once third uncle is able to stand, then you will become a hidden trump card for our Jun family. Third uncle, I believe you understand what I mean. Correct. Jun Wui looked at his nephew with a pleased feeling. Moxie, you have matured. Even if I lose the opportunity to stand again, with you in our Jun family, I believe that our family will not fall. Jun Wui had naturally understood Jun Xie's words. However, to hear those words coming out of his mouth, in addition to the amount of thoughtfulness and long-term planning within, caused Jun Wui to feel greatly elated. Jun Xie gave out a feeble laugh, turning his head to the other side. For someone who had once been the #1 assassin in the world to be complimented as such, you have matured. It somehow felt highly embarrassing. Jun Xie felt himself unable to receive such a praise. In his mind, he was thankful that the praise was Moxie. You have matured. If the praise had been Jun Xie, you have matured, should that happen, his face was as good as lost. If anyone from his past life came to know that someone had spoken to the evil monarch in such a manner, they might just choke to death on the spot. Moxie, what do you think of our house guards training? As he listened to the distant roars or vigor and observing the robust bodies drenched in sweat from training, Jun Wui felt a sense of restlessness which he had not felt for a long time. Nothing more than showing style but no substance. When Jun Xie, who was in the middle of his reverie, heard the question, he answered without hesitation. He did not even hide the tone of disdain in his voice. Style but no substance. Jun Wui laughed as he shook his head. You claim that these training done by our house guards with the cultivation of 7th or 8th level Xian Qi are only style but no substance? Moxie, these words of yours is truly something. Can this even be considered training? What effects will these training have? Jun Xie retorted. This kind of stuff can at best be considered an exercise regimen. How can you call it training? No matter how you look at it, they are simply a bunch of idle people coming together to exercise their body shape. Actually, even the effect of improving their body shape is not really there. I really do not see how this training could help them in the battlefield. Or should I say, it will not help them inflict any damage to their enemies should they meet any. The way I see it, there is no difference between them and a wave of disposable fodder. They are simply a group of normal people, with nothing in them, wasting both time and effort with their worthless workouts. No more. No less. Disposable fodder? Worthless workouts? Jun Wui was unable to restrain himself and shouted. His eyebrows raised. Moxie, I know that you do not like to practice martial arts. That is why you do not understand the importance of basic training. But even so, you cannot belittle these men. Ignorance is not a terrible thing, but to allow your ignorance to insult these soldiers is unacceptable. Each and every one of these men are elite war veterans of 100 battles. It is only because there are no more wars right now that they would become our Jun family bodyguards. Every single one of them has proven themselves to be a real man. I will consider your words from earlier as a casual joke. But if you dare to insult them again, then do not blame me for being unkind. These kinds of words cannot be used even as a joke. When he finished his words, Jun Wui suddenly released an awe-inspiring aura. Even though he has a calm disposition, Jun Xie was also startled. His third uncle's body may have been paralyzed, but his heart could not be shattered. Once his body was restored, he would definitely become the best pillar of support. A joke? Third uncle may not understand what I meant, but everything I said is the truth. At the same time, those words were not meant as a joke. Jun Xie stretched his hands, his face expressing innocence. I did not mean to say that they are useless, nor did I mean to insult them. I believe that anyone that could return from the battlefield alive is an iron-blooded man, worthy of respect. As for their training, anyone could see that they are training assiduously with all their heart. But just because one trains assiduously with all their heart, will one be able to win the war? It is very normal for those who train assiduously with all their heart to die the moment they step into the battlefield. The reason I said they are simply doing worthless workouts is because their way of training is wrong. Their way of training is wrong? Even though Jun Wui's face retained an expression of fury, he had begun considering those words. Since a while ago, this nephew of his had been acting very different compared to the past. Every word of his would contain certain meanings. Could it be? Let us take these two sparring guards as an example. Third uncle, from your observation, do you think these two are playing a game or fighting each other? Every attack is done with reservation, their faces filled with smiles. Hee. Can this still be called training? Even basic training cannot be this childish. They are simply having fun in pairs. Is this not showing style but no substance? Jun Xie pointed with his hands. Let us look there instead. Those men are lifting logs to the point where they are drenched in sweat before putting it down. It seems to be quite difficult, right? But in fact, it is worth fart. They have not even reached the limit of their bodies. These men possess a huge amount of strength, however. They stopped lifting once they start perspiring all over, even though they still have plenty of energy to spare. In other words, even if they were to continue training like this for 10 years, their strength will not progress in any way. The only effect is that they will be more proficient with certain actions. By doing so, their slumbering potential becomes wasted. Is this not a worthless workout? For these people, they can survive in the battlefield thanks to their good luck. As for being labeled a warrior or a hero, that is something of a happy accident. Jun Xie heartlessly looked at those men. Men of this level can at best only be assigned to watch over the house. They cannot be entrusted with bigger forms of responsibility. Third uncle. After listening to all these, do you still think I am insulting them? Jun Xie's words can only be described as terribly blunt. However, Jun Wui did not become angry. Instead, he became submerged in his thoughts. Jun Xie gave out several "hey"s in laughter. If Grandpa had really thought of depending on these people to preserve the Jun family, then I fear that this family would already have been destroyed hundreds and thousands of times. As such, I conclude that Grandpa must have another group of elites. These elites are the true pillars of strength of the Jun family. Even though I have never seen them nor did I obtain any confirmation, I am confident that they exist. As for these people, they are here simply to serve as a front. Third uncle. You are not possibly trying to tell me that you actually have that high of an evaluation towards these men who can only serve as a front, right? At this moment, Jun Wui was looking at Jun Xie with a strange expression. After a long time, he said, if these men's training were to be handed over to you, what can I expect? What kind of unbelievable strength can they obtain if you were to train them? Hand over their training to me? I do not have that kind of free time. Jun Xie curled his lips, smelling their sweaty odor every day. I will end up smelling them to death. The smell of soldiers does not equate the smell of sweat. The military spirit is also neither a product of sweat nor shouts. It is the product of killing in the battlefield. Bring me over there. Jun Wui gave a hang, his chiseled face looking contemplative but firm. Jun Moxie, show me your true abilities. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 28. Are you not trash? When the both of them reached the side of the training grounds, Jun Wui gave a cough and shouted, all military units assemble. Line up before me. He actually gave out a military order. It has already been 10 years since Jun Wui issued a military order. However, these words that came from Jun Wui's mouth brought forth a decisive force fused with killing aura behind it. They were suddenly filled with hope that this great general had once again regained his heroic vigor. This was a great general capable of bestowing and snatching the life of others. All who heard the military order had the same feeling within them. If they did not go over to the designated place as soon as possible, then the consequence would be for heads to roll. There was no time to spare. In just a moment's time, 300 house guards stood orderly before the two of them. Observing their rough faces filled with sweat, Jun Wui nodded with satisfaction. Raising his hand, he pointed to Jun Xie and said, from this moment onwards, third young master will be solely responsible for your training. No matter what his orders may be, you must unconditionally obey. Understood? After he said those words, an uproar broke out. No one answered even after a long time. A furious expression filled Jun Wui's face, but he did not say anything. He only looked at Jun Xie. As he had said before, Jun Xie was now the highest-ranked officer here. In other words, the moment those words left his mouth was the moment Jun Xie was given this position. No matter what these people do in the end, it will all be Jun Xie's responsibility. Jun Wui would also not interfere in how Jun Xie exercised his authority as the highest officer. If this nephew of his could not even pass this hurdle, then it would signify that he was only boasting for the past few days. He should also cut off any hope he may have. Jun Xie laughed bitterly in his heart. Stepping forward, he started, earlier on. Third uncle and I were observing your training process. Third uncle asked me what I thought about your training. Was it comparable to the elites? Was it manly? Hee hee. Jun Xie's voice was in no way loud. However, his words had successfully attracted the attention of the 300 men. Each and every one of them stared at Jun Xie with gleaming eyes. What kind of evaluation would they have in the eyes of this useless young master? I replied, "You are all a bunch of trash. You only know how to eat and waste food supplies. A bunch of freeloading trash waiting for death's call. If a war were to suddenly break out now and you people were sent out, then each and every one of you will die almost immediately. Of that, I have no doubt." 300 warriors suddenly inhaled deeply. Eyes simmering with fury stared at Jun Xie, their faces turning blotched red. Humiliation. Utter humiliation. One of the warriors stepped forward and asked, his face looking as though it was about to spout flames. "Third young master, what do you mean by saying that? We may be the house guards of the Jun family, but all of us are soldiers who have survived 100 battles. Even if you are the master, you should not insult us like this." Insult you? No, no, no. The ones who are truly insulting you are none other than yourselves. Is there any need for me to insult you further? Do you even have the qualifications for me to insult? Jun Xie smiled. He stuck out his index finger and waved it lightly. Are you feeling resentful? Do you feel the desire to beat me up? Very well. I will give you a chance. As long as you can refute my arguments, then I will allow you to beat me up. Third uncle will not interfere. This is also my first order ever. Another uproar broke out. Jun Xie continued with a cool voice. Let me ask you all who claim to have survived 100 battles. Weren't there a handful among those who entered the military at the same time as you who ended up being promoted to generals, sergeants, becoming military officers and are no longer normal soldiers? Their positions are much higher than yours are. Surely, you will not deny this, right? The warrior stared blankly before nodding hesitantly. How can this be considered an argument? In the field of war, there will certainly be a good number of soldiers who end up becoming more skilled or becoming promoted. Many of their fellow soldiers had been promoted due to their contributions in the war, rising up the ranks step by step. This was a normal thing. Why would the young master talk about this? But why is it that you people did not become generals? It was because you were incapable. Thus, if you were to be compared to those people, you have all suffered elimination once. Jun Xie heartlessly continued while looking at them. Next, I want you to consider those who served at the same time as you did. I believe many of their xian qi cultivation were not as good as yours. Perhaps some may be a bit stronger, but mostly were only around the same as yours. Am I correct? That is correct. Why did we not become generals? Everyone who was hit by those words found themselves feeling giddy and confused. Unable to recover, they could only involuntarily nod their heads as they listened on. There were also those who whispered to themselves, those who succeeded in becoming generals were simply those who managed to grasp onto the opportunity to do so. In other words, their luck was simply that good. Besides, this following statement of yours is simply nonsensical. If those people do not have enough strength, why would they be allowed to serve in the army? If their strength far surpassed ours, then would they be assigned to become normal soldiers like us? However, Many amongst them managed to break through the bottleneck of the 9th level Xian Qi during their military tenure and in the midst of battle, becoming a real expert. After the war was over, many families were eagerly trying to employ them. This is also a fact. No. This matter was naturally a common occurrence, causing everyone to nod their heads again. However, they were no longer as forceful as before. Some of them even exhibited a glimmer of shame in their eyes. Every level of Xian Qi is a bottleneck. The higher the level, the difficulty of breaking through becomes that much harder. The 8th and 7th level may have only one level of difference, but the gap is almost as big as the difference between heaven and earth. There were many people who managed to attain the 8th level of Xian Qi cultivation, but they ended up being forever stuck. They were never able to step into the subsequent 9th level for their entire lives. There was no need to even mention about stepping onto the higher silver level. 9 and below are but ants. This sentence was not made as a joke. They advanced, but you all did not. Thus, when compared to these men, you have all been eliminated yet again. Do any of you disagree? Jun Xie looked at them with disdain. The training grounds became silent and motionless. Everyone had become speechless. After the war ended, many soldiers wanted to leave the army, but some were offered jobs from some secretive organizations of the kingdom or some other private military forces. Some were even transferred to different units of the military. This is yet another fact. No. Jun Xie smiled as he asked. This kind of occurrence was even more common. Everyone on the field remained silent. The expressions of disgrace and shame on their faces became even more extreme. None of you were among these people who were transferred away. This is the 3rd time you all suffered elimination. Jun Xie continued attacking them. After that, you came to our Jun family. Who still remembers the original number of people who came here? Reporting to young master, the original number was 500 men. Even though the warrior had understood Jun Xie's intention, he still answered, his face turning red. Right. In other words, there are 200 less men now. Where then did these 200 men go to? Jun Xie slowed down for 2 breaths. I am certain that they were not forced out, nor were they killed. They were selected to carry a heavier responsibility. But why were you not selected? It was because you were not as capable as they were. Clearly, you have all suffered another round of elimination. Some of the house guards breathed heavily. Some had their eyes turned red, but none of them spoke a word. Now tell me, after having been eliminated time and again, ask your own hearts. Are you not trash? Jun Xie asked as he turned his head, placing his ears before them. Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 29. Extreme Provocation. They say some defeats are meaningful and losing makes you stronger. Do you understand what that means? For living creatures, victory is life, and defeat means death. It's an extreme example, but humans retain that instinct. Those who know the terror of defeat, hunger for victory. Tepe Kiyoshi Kurako no basket. No answer came forth. The house guards were all left breathless. Their faces flushed red, as though they were all suffocating. An unbelievable degree of humiliation coursed deep into their hearts, causing them to feel utterly shamed. Why? If others can do it, why can't we? Others can break through to the next level, but we, on the other hand, could not. Those fellow comrades had once fought by our side, but are now occupying positions of authority, looking down on others from their lofty positions. Why is it that we are unable to look down on others as they are now? Some of you may say, those who manage to become generals through their contributions are all people with good luck. As for those who manage to advance higher in terms of xian qi cultivation, their talents are simply higher compared to you all. Others did not select you because they cannot recognize your potential. I will say only this. Those are but petty quibble. Luck? Why didn't you people grab onto that luck? Those of you who think that you were born with bad talents are those who admit to being a trash by birth. Those who complain that others cannot recognize your talent. I say that is a stupid excuse. If you are the employer, would you choose a trash or a useful person? Everyone remained silent, each of them breathing heavily, their eyes completely red. The reason I am talking about all these is not because I wanted to poke at your old scars. It is because you people are living too comfortable of a life, leading to a loss of courage. As the saying goes, be aware of shame and move forward with courage. It is not scary to be in the wrong. What is scary is that all of you are still unaware that you are in the wrong, showing satisfaction at your accomplishments, being prideful of your own self. This is simply unforgivable. Those of you here have never considered this matter before. If any of you had considered what I had said before, then you would not be here. There exist many kinds of motivation for us humans. However, humiliation remains the most important of them all. Tell me, do you want to continue your existence as a trash? Do you want to continue on being a worthless freeloader waiting for death's call while watching over the courtyard? Do you want to continue being humiliated and stepped on by others? Do you want to continue being lectured by me to the point where none of you can lift your heads up high again? Before Jun Xie could continue, a loud voice rang out before him, "No." At first, the cries were disordered, but later on, the shout resounded to the point where it could topple mountains and invert the seas. Everyone in the vicinity had their emotions incited as they shouted uncontrollably. Their shouts resounded loudly as though they were about to break their own throats, their blood having surged upwards into their heads. Excellent. This shows that there is still hope for you people. You people are not beyond salvation. Jun Xie walked forward 2 paces, and then suddenly tilted his head. Do any of you have this kind of thoughts? Jun Xie slowed down and waited for a moment before continuing. Even if we are trash, we are still stronger than you who are nothing more than a useless freeloading debauchee, one who can amount to nothing. Am I right? That is why, even though you are bound by my third uncle's order to obey me, all of you feel only contempt for me. Am I right again? Many of them raised their heads. Even though none of them dared to say a word, their expressions showed that their hearts had indeed felt that way. Unfortunately for you, your thought process is a mistake. Furthermore, it is an exceptionally big mistake. Jun Xie spread out his hands. I am merely a debauchee, whereas all of you are a survivor of 100 battles, an iron-blooded man. But I will say this. None of you have more worth than me. Why are you not worth more than me? The answer is simple. It is because I have a good grandfather. It is because I have a good uncle. It is because I have a good father, and also because I have 2 good brothers. It is they who sacrificed everything so that our Jun family can be where it is today. These are all things that you do not have. Even if I, Jun Moxie, am nothing more than a downright debauchee, even if I am to go kill innocents, there will be someone who will help me solve the problem. There will be someone who will help me succeed in life. This is yet another thing which none of you have. That is also why none of you have more worth than me. The laws of heaven has its own equilibrium. You must first sacrifice something before you can obtain something else. Even a debauchee must pay a price for being a debauchee. Moreover, this price is by no means small. Among the normal populace, There is no such thing as a debauchee. That is because they are unable to meet the necessary conditions. Their parents did not pay the price for them to do so. That is why none of them can be insulted as a debauchee. And that is why they will never be called a debauchee. There is no need for us to look at others. The best example is right in front of you. My grandfather, Jun Xie, was a commoner from birth. He entered the military and was baptized by the blood of 100 battles, forging the Jun family of today. Did you think that my grandfather was far stronger than all of you when he first started out? The story of Jun Xie's rise to prominence was basically a legend within Tianxiang Kingdom. Naturally, these men knew about his life story better than anyone else. Hearing those words, their eyes emitted a blazing spark. Some of them began trembling all over. Their hearts stirred to the zenith. Could we also have such a time? That is enough. Having said so much, I believe all of you understand what I am trying to say. All of you have enough luck. Enough to survive the war. Gaining enough contributions to live this kind of peaceful lives to the point of treating training as a game. However, the price that you have paid is enough only for you to pass the days like this. No more. No less. Jun Xie suddenly stopped pacing and turned to face them, stating each word with emphasis. I have only this to ask of you. Do you hunger to break through this current state and become a first-rate expert? Do you hunger to surpass those who had achieved more than you? Do you hunger to carry a greater and more important responsibility instead of being just a residential watchdog? Jun Xie gave a peculiar smile. Do you want your children and grandchildren to be able to do what I do? They can become a carefree debauchee that nobody can bully. Did you ever consider that if you were to succeed one day, then as long as your children are born, your successes would become an unimaginably powerful form of assistance for them? Have you ever considered that this would allow them to climb to the top with much less effort than necessary? You can even become a big family like that of our Jun family, Li family, or the Dugu family. The fate of your child and grandchild can be transformed by your efforts alone. The bright future that Jun Xie had painted out caused everyone to breathe heavily in excitement. Their fists were clenched tightly, green veins pulsing uncontrollably, eyes becoming bloodshot. Amidst the silence, Jun Xie suddenly roared. Do you want it? Yes or no? Yes. 300 men shouted loudly in unison. Their cries shook the skies. 300 voices exploded outwards from the bottom of their hearts at the same time. At this moment, it seemed as though heaven and earth itself trembled a few. Since you want it, then listen to my orders. Under my training regimen, no one is allowed to complain. I will lead you in a way that will allow your sacrifices to bring you the biggest possible reward. Jun Xie coldly looked at them. However, everyone must keep in mind of this one important fact. Under my training regimen, there is a chance that some of you will die. Some of you may even end up being disabled. This is the price that you may have to pay, and so I shall give you the opportunity to reconsider. After thinking about it carefully, those of you who are still willing to accept my training regimen, take a step forward. Those who are afraid do not move from your original position. I will warn you again. With the exception of dying, no one is allowed to quit before my training ends. That is why all of you must make this choice here and now. I will count up to 3. Before I count up to 3, you must make your decision. Jun Xie shouted loudly. 1. Before the words 2 and 3 were uttered, all 300 men, with a stern expression of warriors marching bravely to their death, took a big step forward in an orderly manner. This step of theirs was done with such force that the dirt on the ground trembled and dust were raised. Even the ground beneath them seemed to have shaken from their actions. Jun Wui, who was watching at the side, looked onwards with eyes filled with approval and respect. Jun Xie had raised their morale using provocative tactics. At this moment, none of them would raise an eyebrow even if they were ordered to march to their deaths. Jun Xie had stimulated their morale to the very limit. The bloodthirsty nature of these war veterans had been pulled out to the extreme. Jun Wui was a general who had always been the one to stir the hearts of soldiers. However, listening to these words, he too felt his blood boiling, his breath becoming deep. At this very moment, he felt as though he was overlooking a blazing, acrid smoke filling the air, corpses piling up as high as mountains, blood flowing everywhere akin to a sea of blood. A lengthy and desolate howl rose from within the soul, seemingly carrying within it a grand and magnificent image. It brought forth the image of 1,000 soldiers, marching indifferently to their bloody deaths, their hearts burning up from their fiery blood. Charge through 100 battles without regrets. Face life and death without regrets. The spark of bloodlust. At this point in time, Jun Wui and the 300 men all exuded the same spark of bloodlust from their eyes. In this one moment, all 300 men shared the same thought. In order to rid themselves of this humiliation, why should they not brave death? Not even Jun Xie could have imagined that this action of his, forced by Jun Wui to take over the responsibility of training these men, would result in him creating an invincible team capable of shaking the world. This team would strike fear into the hearts of the enemies, crippling their courage and forcing them to retreat without a fight. An unstoppable godlike team. This squadron was named Sky-Raising Soul Devourers. The otherworldly evil monarch's first ever team of warriors who will become invincible throughout the world was born today. An unstoppable godlike team was born of utter humiliation. What kind of brilliance will this team show to the world? Please subscribe to this channel so that we are more enthusiastic in providing the best video for you. Chapter 30. Harsh. Since you are all willing, I will now announce the rules of my training, Jun Xie coldly stated. I will say this only once. Anyone who violates the rules will be killed without exception. There are no second chances here. In my training, there is no corporal punishment. The word regret does not exist. There is only victory, or death. These two are the only paths available for you. From this moment onwards until the end of your training, I am your highest authority. During this period of time, you are only allowed to listen to my orders. You are not allowed to listen to any other person. Remember well, even if it is my third uncle or even my grandfather, even they are not allowed to interfere. Anyone dares who violate this command, decapitation. Everyone must arrive on time for training. Anyone dares to be late, decapitation. Anyone dares to voice their dissatisfaction, decapitation. Anyone dares to disobey my command, decapitation. 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 A series of decapitation shouts rang loudly, its murderous aura ascending to the skies. In correspondence to these shouts of decapitation, Jun Xie's eyes exuded an awe-inspiring aura filled with killing intent. 300 warriors stared straight ahead. Their bodies stood straight. Their muscles tensed. Fear evident within them. Even Jun Wui, who was seated on the wheelchair, had been unconsciously affected. His blood boiled. His upper body parts straightened. It felt as though he had returned back in time to when he first started, listening to his father's lecture. Staring at Jun Xie's eyes at that very moment brought forth a zealous expression to his face. The rampaging aura of an iron-blooded soldier, which had been lost, had surged back into him. Jun Xie's provocative words had transformed these house guards. These iron-blooded men had once again donned the identity of a fearless soldier. Their imposing battle aura had risen to its peak. Jun Wui can already imagine what kind of effect this provocation can accomplish in a real battle. All who heard those words would smile, exuding that form of heroic fearlessness as they charged towards death. Life and death no longer mattered. No resentment. No regrets. With such a kind of leadership, how can one lose? At another side of the training grounds, Grandpa Jun was standing within the shadows. His face turned red as his calm demeanor lost its ground against his boiling blood. His eyes stared widely at Jun Xie. Both his hands and beard trembled, showing just how excited his heart was. Is this really my debauchee grandson? Did these words really come out of his mouth? What a magnificent aura of aspiration! What a sky-towering spirit! What a... Grandpa Jun got carried away and started rubbing his eyes. Ah! He rubbed to the point of tears. After he managed to calm down the feelings of excitement, Jun Xie turned away. His originally hunched body suddenly became straight. His eyes glinted akin to surging lightning, and his body glowed with a form of pride and self-confidence. The housekeeper, Old Pang, suddenly felt that the great general who had once become an invincible figure across the world had returned. After the Jun family suffered countless tragic and bloody battles, Old Pang had not seen this heroic bearing from Jun Xie for countless years. But now, it has finally resurfaced. Indeed, Jun Xie's performance that had given this old man a great surprise and hope. It had allowed Jun Xie to believe that his Jun family still had hope. Moreover, this was a great, radiant hope. This grandson might actually be able to let the Jun family regain its glory. Wrong. It is not a might, but a certainty. The heavens itself is blessing the Jun family. Relay my commands. From this moment on, anything pertaining to the young master, be it his words or actions, will all become our Jun family's #1 secret. This is a first-grade verbal command. Anyone who dares to violate my command will be killed without exception. In addition, those who violate my command will face the 9 familial extermination. Clear those spies sent by the other families that we were keeping an eye on. As for those sent by the royal court, find an excuse to transfer them away. Next, mobilize all our shadow operatives. They are to carefully observe the inner and outer movements of the Jun residents. Anyone found to be passing off messages to the outside must be killed without exception. We will take this opportunity to clean the house. Put in every effort to ensure that nothing slips past us. Jun Xien's tone carried with it the image of an unyielding tyrant. A determined tyrant with no tolerance for any form of doubt. At this moment, Old Pang could sense a strong murderous aura seeping out from him. Through this, he could tell how important this matter was to Jun Xie. If someone were to actually leak anything out, then Jun Xie would seriously start a bloodbath. Jun Xie did not know why his own grandson would conceal his own capabilities to such an extent. However, since he did that much, then there would certainly be a reason. There must be a plan. Jun Xie's performance today had truly surprised him. An unexpectedly pleasant surprise. Nevertheless, in his opinion, this grandson of his had made a somewhat reckless move. If news of this matter were to spread out, then a great number of eyes will set their sights onto Jun Xie. Grandpa Jun had no desire to find out if these people had good intentions or bad intentions. Thus, this wise old man decided that the first thing he must do for his grandson was to help him clean his butt. He issued a verbal order. A first-grade verbal order. Any who disobeyed will face the extermination of 9 kindred. In reality, there was no such thing as concealment of abilities. Jun Moxie was simply no longer Jun Moxie, but was instead Jun Xie. He was the king of assassins from a different world, the evil monarch. Meanwhile, Jun Xie's shouts kept resounding from the training grounds. Now, listen to my orders. You now have 10 breaths of time to prepare. I want the 300 of you to form 2 teams. If you are unable to complete this task on time, all of you will go run around the training ground for 100 laps. Begin. Once the sentence was uttered, the formation became a chaotic mess as men moved in and out, interweaving between one another. In a short amount of time, they had already divided themselves into 2 groups, each consisting of 150 men. Good. 150 men will form a company, and then divide it into 5 platoons. Each platoon holds 30 men. Next, divide the platoon into 3 squads with 10 men each. I will now give you half an incense stick's time. I do not care how you decide, but you must elect the leader for each company, platoons, and squads. Remember, this choice is one you made. As such, you will need to obey the orders of your leader. If anyone tries to disobey orders and show disrespect, then he will be punished according to military protocols. Decapitation. After saying that, Jun Xie ignored their discussions and turned to face Jun Wui. Jun Wui silently regarded him, then suddenly smiled out. His eyes exhibited a heavy sense of surprise. Moxie, your performance today had genuinely shocked your third uncle. Jun Xie brushed his nose as he laughed. What are your thoughts, uncle? Jun Xie did not specify his question, but Jun Wui understood what he meant. Originally, I had intended to nitpick at you. However, I truly could not find any faults to point out. If our kingdom's military forces can undergo this kind of training, how can they not sweep uncontested across the world? Sweep uncontested throughout the world. A dark line appeared on Jun Xie's forehead. Third uncle is exaggerating. It is only that my starting concept is different from yours. The reason you train your soldiers is for the sake of Tianxiang Kingdom. However, the reason I train these soldiers is for the sake of our Jun family. I am training them to ensure the safety of our family. When taking this into consideration, one can see a critical difference. For the sake of the kingdom? For the sake of our Jun family? Jun Wui was originally a great general who was highly loyal to the kingdom. But, after having suffered such a tragedy and forced to idle away at home for 10 years, this thought had slowly faded away. He could see that the Jun family had rendered a great number of meritorious services to the country after suffering through innumerable hardships. However, both his brothers and nephews were killed in battle. As for himself, he was paralyzed for life. If these had happened on the battlefield and their enemies openly defeated them, then Jun Wui would have no complaints. But everything that had happened to them occurred under suspicious circumstances, and yet the kingdom remained indifferent. His father, Jun Zhantien, had constantly tried to investigate this matter. Several times he had managed to find some clues regarding the matter, but was suddenly cut off from any further information. There was no way that these occurrences were not caused by someone. Yet again, the kingdom remained apathetic to these occurrences, causing Jun Wui to become detached. If this was 10 years ago, if this was the hot-blooded Jun Wui from back then, hearing someone say that training soldiers was for the sake of their own family instead of for the sake of the kingdom, he would have jumped out to catch the culprit, accusing him to being a criminal, a traitor to the kingdom. But the Jun Wui of today no longer have that kind of perspective. Instead, He was at a complete loss. Was it worth it? Was it truly worth it? Our Jun family is a great pillar which many had set their sights on, and is currently standing upon a precarious position. The kingdom, on the other hand, is filled with tumultuous undercurrents. Under these circumstances, our Jun family could face an insoluble calamity at any moment. If it was not for this, is there really anything bad about being an unaccomplished freeloader waiting for death's call? Jun Xie sighed. This is the reason why you finally decided to reveal your true self. Jun Wui stared quietly at Jun Xie with falcon-like eyes. Are you saying that if our family was not forced to these kinds of straits, then you would have continued messing around as a debauchee? I find it hard to believe that someone as young as you can possess this profound level of insight. This story will be continued to chapter 31. For those of you who are not subscribed yet, please subscribe. The interesting and best stories will be updated. See you again in the next episode.